Hello Year 2! So in today's English lesson we're going to take another look at what we wrote yesterday and we're going to see if we can edit and improve it, thinking about our Writer's Toolkit. So let's remind ourselves of all the wonderful work we've done and all those features we're hoping to see today. So we should see capital letters and full stops, which we learnt about or recapped on Monday. The past tense, and we learnt about tenses yesterday. Expanded noun phrases, which we learnt about last week, powerful verbs and adverbs. So we're hoping to see all those things today. So here's the introduction that I wrote yesterday. Let's remind ourselves of what it says. One early morning in the Sahara Desert, the hot sun shone down on a tree. A young girl called Zara looked up at the last few dry leaves that hung from the branch. Zara was kind and thoughtful. She was dressed in brightly coloured clothes but wore nothing on her feet. So the first thing I'm looking for is capital letters and full stops. So I'm going to check that all of my sentences start with a capital letter, end in a full stop, start in a capital letter, end in a full stop, start with a capital letter, end in a full stop, start with a capital letter, end with a full stop. But we know that capital letters just don't start sentences. They also are used for the names of places and people. So the person in my story is Zara. So I've got to double check that I've used a capital letter for her name here and here. But I've got another name in my story, and that's the setting where my story took place. It took place in the Sahara Desert, and you'll see the capital letters are missing. So I'm going to underline the S and I'm going to write a capital above, underline the D, capital D above. So there we go. I've checked my capital letters and I've checked my full stops. Next I'm going to check the past tense. So I know that if I'm writing in the past, I'll be using the verb was, and then my other verbs will end in ED. So I've got called here in ED. Shone is also past tense. Yesterday I shone, today I shine. So I know that that is a past tense verb. Looked ends in ED, so I know I've got that one right. Hung is also in the past tense. Then I've got was, dressed ends in ED. Great, so I know I've written in the past tense, so I can tick the past tense. Expanded noun phrases. So an expanded noun phrase is an adjective or two adjectives and a noun. So one early morning, so the word early describes the morning. In the Sahara Desert. I don't have a describing word for the Sahara Desert, and actually I want the beginning of my story to make it really clear how hot it was. So I'm going to put a little upside down V and I'm going to think of a word that means super hot. I'm going to go with sweltering. One early morning in the sweltering Sahara Desert, the hot sun shone. So hot is a describing word for the noun sun, so that's an expanded noun phrase, but I wonder if I could make it sound even hotter. So instead of just having hot, why don't I use boiling? Hot. And because I've got two adjectives there, I'm going to use a comma in between. One early morning in the sweltering Sahara Desert, the boiling hot sun shone down on a tree. Oh, now William came up with a brilliant adjective last week, which I'm going to borrow to describe the tree. He came up with the word withered, which I thought was a superb word to describe the tree, so I'm going to borrow it. One early morning in the sweltering Sahara Desert, the boiling hot sun shone down on a withered tree. Young describes the girl, so a young girl called Zara looked up at the last few. Dry describes the leaves that hung from I might go empty to describe the branch. But because empty starts with a vowel, I need to make that an. Zara looked up at the last few dry leaves that hung from an empty branch. Zara was kind and thoughtful. She was dressed in brightly coloured clothes. So I've described them as brightly coloured clothes, but wore nothing on her feet. Fantastic. So I've added in some adjectives there. So I have written some expanded noun phrases. I now want powerful verbs. So instead of going for really boring verbs, I want some interesting ones. So let's see if we can. Shone down. Yep, I like that. Called Zara. I could say named Zara, but I think called looks okay. I wonder if I could change looked. What is another word for looked? What about gazed? A young girl called Zara gazed up at the last few dry leaves that hung from the empty branch. She was dressed in brightly coloured clothes but wore nothing on her feet. Yeah, I'm really happy with that. So I'm going to tick my powerful verbs. And lastly, adverbs. Now remember, adverbs describe the action. So adverbs tell us how and when. So let's have a think. One early morning in the sweltering Sahara Desert, the boiling hot sun shone. I could describe how it shone. Shone brightly. Could say brightly, couldn't I? Shone brightly. So that's describing how the sun shone on the tree. A young girl called Zara gazed sadly, because she's sad that the leaves are falling, up at the last few dry leaves that hung from the empty branch. Zara was kind and thoughtful. She was dressed in brightly coloured clothes but wore nothing on her feet. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to read it before and I'm going to read it after. You decide which one you think is the better version. One early morning in the Sahara Desert, the hot sun shone down on a tree. A young girl called Zara looked up at the last few dry leaves that hung from a branch. Zara was kind and thoughtful. She was dressed in brightly coloured clothes but wore nothing on her feet. So that was how it started. Now let's listen to it now. One early morning in the sweltering Sahara Desert, the boiling hot sun shone brightly down on a withered tree. A young girl called Zara gazed sadly up at the last few dry leaves that hung from an empty branch. Zara was kind and thoughtful. She was dressed in brightly coloured clothes but wore nothing on her feet. I think that's so much better than the version I started with. So take a look at your writing that you wrote yesterday. Use the toolkit to see if you can edit and improve. Well done, everybody.